Hi, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's doing well who watched previously. If you're new here, I thought this would be a good opportunity to kind of really recap what this channel is about. I started this channel off predominantly from the standpoint in the frame, modelling, and of course it applies to that. And the more I'll do in modelling, the more I'll be able to comment on it. As at the minute, because I'm still in the very early stages of that, there ain't much I can really comment on at that time. But it isn't just about modelling or people who are into modelling or doing modelling. I didn't want to narrow myself only to that setting, that's the only thing I talk about on this channel, because it isn't. There are other things that I think I want to talk about, and it's what we do on this channel, what these videos are about, is if I believe something is relevant or important, and it hits a chord with me, I do a video on it. Again, it might not appeal to the masses. I'm aware that this channel isn't a massive channel, but like I said from the beginning, as long as one or two people get something from this, then that's more than enough, really. I think in this day and age, many of us are not so concerned with the content that we're actually consuming. We judge it more on the views that it gets. That's my opinion anyway. I'll leave it up to you to decide what you think. So that's what this channel is about. It's about if I think something is relevant or something is important to me and I think it would make a decent video, or somebody, just one person, somebody might get something from it, then that's more than substantial. And I just thought I'd quickly recap about what this channel is about, especially if anyone is new here, if this is the first time you've watched one of my videos. But it's not just specifically about modelling or models or anything like that. But of course, the more I do on that, the more I can comment on it. But of course, I'm in that limbo stage, that area of, well, I don't really know a lot about it because I'm only starting out in it. So there we are. What I wanted to talk about was something that happened to me today, actually. It was something that kind of came out of the blue, and it was sort of an eye-opener. And maybe some people might find it a bit... I don't want to depress people. That isn't what I want to do. If anything, I want people to be a bit optimistic and a bit upbeat about things. I don't really want to bring people down. But the outcome, after when I get into it in a minute, the outcome was a very positive outcome. But it was the situation itself. And I want you to think to yourself, I just want you to think, what would have you done in that situation? So, anyway, I digress. Today, I was out and about, and I came across this guy who was a bit upset and a bit distraught. He was a 25-year-old man, and he was sitting on a bench, and he was crying. And about 4 or 5 people passed him as I was walking that way. And I couldn't see from that distance that he was crying, but about 4 or 5 people just passed him, just walked past him. Now, I don't know, but when you see somebody, a young man, or somebody who's young and they're sitting on a bench midday, looking pretty depressed, pretty fed up. To me, and this might just be me, I might be insane, but to me, the initial thing would be to ask them, are they okay? And as I say, bear in mind, at least 4 or 5 people just walked past him, didn't say anything to him. And by the way, I asked him if it was okay if I mentioned this in a video. He's aware of this, now that I've mentioned this in a video. And I just felt that I had to, just ask him what's the matter, why are you crying? He's only the same age as me, and I don't. It just felt strange that 4 or 5 people just walked straight past. I don't know. So what would you do in that situation? You've got time to spare. You're not in a rush. I understand that. I get if you're in a rush and you've got other things to do, then maybe you haven't got the time to spare to sit there and ask him what's the matter. That I can understand to a degree. But what would you do in that situation if you have got time to spare and you come across somebody who is looking pretty much at the wit's end? That's the best way I can describe it. He was, not looking the best. So what would you do? Just think to yourself. What would you do? Would you ask him how he is, or would you just walk past? Again, there's no judgment. Each to their own. It's not coming from a place of judgment. I always make that point. Because I know some people can get a bit annoyed in the comments if they feel that I'm having a dig or aiming it at, I'm like, okay. But that isn't what's happening. It's just a simple question. Just think of that scenario. What would you do in that situation? So, I stopped the guy and I said, so what's the matter? And he lived alone. He was 25, and he hadn't seen his family for a few years. I'm not going to go into all the reasons why, but he hadn't seen his family for a few years, and he was missing his family. And in the end, I must have sat and spoke to this guy for about 25 minutes. It didn't seem that long at the time, but that when I think about it now, the time I started speaking to him, by the time he parted ways, must have been about 25 to 30 minutes, so a good half hour. And I found that even though he was a complete and utter stranger, by the end of it, we had a very good conversation, and we ended up, laughing. It ended up being quite upbeat by the end of 30 minutes. How he was at the end of the conversation was a million miles away. He was like a completely different guy to when I walked past him and I saw that he was pretty upset. And he said that he felt alone and that he didn't really have any, he didn't really see where his future was heading. And he kept referring to himself, he kept saying that he felt he was a loser. And that was really insightful. I thought, yeah. What is it then that you think, or that I think, shall we say, devil's advocate, that you think would make you feel that you are a loser? To the point where you have to go and sit on a park bench and you're literally at your wit's end. And I suppose it comes down to one of the main things I took away from this conversation with this young man today is how many of us, we determine success through very very vague things in that one size fits all. It's like universal. If we haven't got the job we want by the time we're a certain age, we start thinking bad of ourselves. That's a big one, that. And that was one of the implications, one of the reasons this man today was like he was. But of course there was some more personal and more upsetting things that I won't go into, because it's a bit, I don't really want to share it on the internet. Even though he's aware that I'm featuring him in a video, but I don't want to mention everything that was said. But many of the things that he was upset about were kind of things that, when it was put to him in the conversation, things that really are quite funny, really, and are quite, when you actually think about it to yourself, they're not a big deal. Do you know what I mean? In that we judge ourselves based on the expectations of others. And I'd say 60 to 70% of what had got to this man today, from what he was telling me. And bear in mind, this is one conversation with this man. So I'm not an expert on this guy, I don't know all the implications. But it was one conversation. But I'd say to 70% of it, much of what got him down was the expectation he'd put on himself from others. Worrying about what other people thought. Worrying about impressing other people. Were other people disappointed in him? How many of us have been there? How many of us have thought that at some time? I have. And I should imagine you have. At some point. We've lumbered ourselves with other people's expectations. And when you actually stop and think about it, and this is what I put to this fella today, when you actually stop and think, you shouldn't really concern yourself to that degree about what other people think. You just shouldn't. Because unfortunately it can be detrimental. And this was living proof today. This was a man at his wit's end because he was concerning himself with expectations that had been put on him by other people. That wasn't all of it, that wasn't the whole reason, but like I say, I'd say 65 to 70% of what was causing this man's uproar was that. That's what I took from in this conversation. And I thought it was very, very pertinent. I thought it was really important because I think there was so many of us who can relate to that. You might not be like it now, but there might have been some point in your life where you have concerned yourself to the ridiculous degree about what other people think about it. Or are you meeting expectations that other people you know are? And like I say, I've been there. Not for a while, but I've been there. I think as you get a bit older, into your mid-20s, late 20s, you start concerning yourself with things that you wouldn't have when you was a bit younger, as this guy was today. He felt because he was in his mid-20s that now he'd got to grow up, he'd got to be responsible, he'd got to prove himself. Now, I don't know if someone said that to him, I don't know if someone directly said that to him, but he felt in himself that he had to prove something, not only to himself, but to people, to society. Not one person or maybe two, but to just the people. because he felt now he'd reached a certain age where he'd got to do that. And I kind of made him see, a long story short, I kind of made him see that actually your opinion and your mental well-being and your happiness is very important as well. I'm not saying don't give a toss at all about what other people think. Of course, we all, to a degree, worry about what other people think. It's quite, it's natural, it's normal. But you shouldn't compromise your mental well-being and your happiness just to impress others or accommodate other people. And when he started thinking about it in those terms, he kind of got the gist of what I was saying. And I thought, how many of us right now could be you watching the video? Maybe it isn't you watching this video, I don't know, but it could be. Maybe you, or you've been in that situation yourself. You know how that feels. Or you know somebody who is so concerned about what other people think. So concerned to maintain an image or something just to fit in with other people or accommodate somebody else. I hope you know where I'm going with this. I hope you know what I mean. Again, if only one person does, that's great. It's not for the masses. It's not for these videos aren't for everybody, but So just have a little think to yourself. Are you living your life on your terms? Or are you doing it because you want to impress other people? Or you want to fit in with other people? Again, take a hit, calm down. It's not coming from a place of judgment. But just be honest with yourself. Right now to yourself, if you're watching this. What are you doing? Are you living your life on your terms? Are you doing what you want to do? Or are you trying to accommodate? It might be one person, might be accumulation of people, but are you trying to be part of a crowd or fit in with people? And neither one's wrong, by the way. It's not a right or wrong answer. It's not, well, you should be living this life. So both of them have got a valid place. We all have to, at some point, try and fit in. It's inevitable, But at the same time, if your only focus is trying to fit in, and you're not comfortable with being your own man, that's a bit different. Because then that can lead to what I saw today. Somebody who genuinely felt like he was alone. Because he hadn't met some societal expectation. And again, many of us at some point, whether we know it or not, have probably been through that. But there comes a point where you do have to put your mental health, your happiness first. And it's not selfish. It's very practical. Because you can't please everybody. You can't impress everybody. You're going to get critics whatever you do in life. Doesn't matter what it is. Whatever you do, you're going to get it. You're going to get people who don't like what you're saying, who don't like who you are, you're going to get that. So the best thing you can do, this is my advice to anyone who's interested, who wants to listen. My advice is you live your best life. Because some people will like you, some people will love that, other people not so much. But lumbering yourself with unrealistic expectation. Or it might not even be unrealistic, but it's the degree of expectation you'll then bring on yourself. That's a different thing. If you're putting X amount of expectation on yourself, it's just going to lead to burnout. And that's what I saw today in this young man. Hopefully, it chirped him up a bit, the conversation we had, me and this guy. Hopefully it made him realise that things aren't all that bad, because, particularly, especially if it's because you haven't hit a quota in your business or whatever, because some of the stuff was quite poignant, and like I say, I'm not going to go into all that stuff, but the majority was stuff that I consider is very much, it's changeable. It's things that were within this guy's control that he could change, and also things that in maybe 6 months he'll laugh about. It's just at this point he was going through a bad patch, and it's how we all go through that. We all go through bad patches at some point, but it's how you handle them, I think, if you know what I mean. It's how you cope with that. But how much unrealistic expectation have you put on yourself? Are you worrying about something that, if you're honest with yourself, again, I don't know anyone's situation, but if you're honest with yourself, maybe you're worrying about something that is slightly trivial. Maybe you're obsessing about it. Mate, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be you, but you know, and that's why you should be honest with yourself. What, is it that important, or is it something that, in all the scheme of things, isn't that relevant? There's nothing wrong in putting your mental health first. There isn't. It's very important. It's very important. And the big one is, you have to accept that some people will criticise you for silly things. Some people won't. Not everybody's going to give you a round of applause. It doesn't work like that. But at the same time, most things are trivial, and you find that a lot of the stuff, if you ever had it, think to yourself, have you ever had it where you worried endlessly about something, say something a couple of years ago, and you worried endlessly about something that wasn't that big really. When you look at it now, from hindsight was a wonderful thing. When you look at it now, and you think, why was I worrying to that degree about whatever that was, whatever that insignificant thing was? Have you ever had that situation? I have. I've worried about things that were so things that, when you actually think about it rationally, you wouldn't worry about. But at that time, for whatever reason, that was like the big thing that you were worrying about. And in the scheme of things, it was nothing. Again, I think people can relate to that, because I definitely can. And what I saw in this guy today, there was some of that going on. And by the end of the exchange, he was laughing, he was joking, he was completely different. You went from looking like a broken man to actually thinking, acknowledging that, oh, there is some positives. Not everything is terrible. And I thought, in and of itself, it would make a decent topic. How many expectations do we put on ourselves that shouldn't really be there? You don't owe it really to anybody else to make yourself miserable or bring yourself down, because you don't. But I think quite a few of us do that, or we judge ourselves by what we haven't done instead of focusing on what we have done. Oh, I haven't done that yet. I really want to do that. And then you kick yourself because you haven't done that. But then you forget everything you have done. Something to think about. Something to talk about. Anyway, that's enough of my rambling on. As I say, if you're new here, if this is your first video, go and check out all the other videos. If you want, subscribe. If you don't matter. If you want to leave a comment, leave a comment. You know the story. You know where I'm going with this. So, thanks to anyone who watches. I hope everybody's doing okay. And I'll catch you in the next video, whatever that one's about. Peace. Off.